Stairway to Freedom, Chapter 14. This last chapter will be a bit of an odd sock drawer chapter in which I place the bits and pieces of information that I have added myself after the reading of the actual book. It will be in 3 parts. The first part explains some of the hidden messages contained in the Bible. The second part will be some meditations given to me by the White Brotherhood, and the last part is a series of questions and answers. If you have listened to the book, The Stairway of Freedom, up to this point, you will have no doubt realized that truth, spiritual truth that is often very different to the apparent reality that we see and experience in our everyday lives. Well, the same applies to understanding the stories contained in the Bible. Most biblical scholars tend to interpret the information as an historical record of certain events that occurred in the Middle East many years ago. In other words, they see the Bible as a history book. According to the information that I have received from the White Brotherhood, this is not at all the case. The Bible is a spiritual textbook concerning you and me and our personal relation to God. If the characters and events that are cited in the Bible actually are historical in nature, that is because the people who wrote the Bible cleverly encoded the spiritual message to conceal the truth from people of less than good intent that might have tried to distort the message hidden in the text. As the biblical scholars, priests, etc., were not always the most spiritually advanced people in the world, some of them did, and still do, actually worship the dark forces, unbelievable as this seems. Fortunately, the way that the minds of these people work seems to mask them from the true message hidden in the text of the biblical stories. Other people, of good intent but of limited knowledge, accept the historical content of the stories without question. Studying the historical content will, however, bring little enlightenment, but at least these people do no harm either to themselves or to the true seekers after truth. By way of example, to explain the hidden messages, I would like to quote 2 of the stories in the Bible and explain the spiritual message behind these 2 stories. The first story concerns the birth of Christ. The tale, as written in the Bible, states basically that a baby, Christ, was born of a virgin, Mary, in a stable. Now this may or may not be historical fact, because actually the spiritual message hidden in the story quite simply means this. When a baby is mentioned in the Bible, it always represents your personal aspect of God. A virgin represents your soul, and a building of some sort, in this case a stable, represents your physical body. Thus, the story of the birth of Christ quite simply means that you have a personal spirit of God, and that spirit is contained in a soul which is just a protective coating round the Spirit of God, rather like the shell of an egg protects the embryo bird within, and both the Spirit of God and the soul are in association with your body. That's it. That's all the story means. Now, the second story that I would like to consider is that of David and Goliath. Simplifying the story, it basically states that 2 armies oppose each other on a battlefield, the Philistines and the Israelites. The Israelites are the goodies and the Philistines are the baddies. However, The Philistines have a giant on their side called Goliath, and he is terrifying the Israelites. So the king of Israel asks a shepherd boy named David to sort the problem out. David returns to the battlefront, puts a stone in his sling and throws it at Goliath. The stone finds a chink in Goliath's armour and kills him. The Philistines then run away and the Israelites are victorious. Now, what this story actually means is that the Philistines are the people around us today that try and destroy our peace and happiness in order to bring profit to themselves. These people would include some politicians, some bankers, some world leaders, and so on. Goliath is quite simply the embodiment of all those bad vibrations. The Israelites represent ordinary, good-hearted people, not only Jewish, but all people of all race and colour that try to live in peace and harmony with themselves and their neighbours. The Philistines, being at home in an earthly environment, find it quite easy to control and dominate the simple, good souls, bringing mayhem into the lives of millions of us as they put their evil projects into action. In the story, the king of the Israelites, represented by somebody called Saul, is actually God, the God of all good people. David represents you and me, assuming that we are all good people. So, David, in the story, David speaks to King Saul. This means that you and I meditate and connect with God. Through meditation and prayer, we are given an arm, the power of God. The stone that David projects towards Goliath implies that we can pray for our enemies, and through that act we can direct the mighty force for good, which is God, towards those who would harm us, thus rendering evil people powerless to harm us. So Goliath is slain and the Philistines rendered powerless. The story of David and Goliath quite simply means that through our connection with God, we are able, by the act of prayer, meditation and service to our fellow man, to render powerless those evil people who would harm us. Believe me, it works. Through prayer, meditation, and by trying to live a life in which we try not to harm people, a barrier surrounds us that evil people cannot penetrate. There is also another aspect to this act. If we have this barrier protecting us and someone tries to harm us, the evil force that they project towards us bounces off us and returns to them, bringing into their lives the mayhem that they hoped to bring into our lives. It is the nature of evil thought that once sent out by someone, it has to find a home before it can stop. If you accept, either willingly or because you do not have a barrier in place, that evil thought, it stops with you. If it bounces off of your shield, it has to return to the sender. However, do not try to send an evil thought back to someone yourself. It does not work like that. Just pray for those who would harm you, and the evil force will rebound on its own. You do not have to do anything. Just surround the person trying to harm you with love. Project an emotion of love towards that person or organization that is trying to harm you, and God does the rest. That is the stone that David projected at Goliath. Thus, I have explained 2 stories from the Bible and, I hope, demonstrated that the stories relate to you in your everyday lives. Virtually all the tales recounted in the Bible can be decoded in a similar fashion. The same message is repeated again and again. God exists, and you are part of that God force. Of course, you are free to accept, or not, that which I have explained above. If you wish to visualize God as an old man with a white beard and think of the stories in the Bible as just historical fact, that is up to you. As an addendum to the book Stairway of Freedom, I have some meditations and questions and answers that were given to me over a period of time, and I would like to read them to you. They may be of interest. We commence with the meditations, which were received periodically over a number of years and were found to be highly beneficial when spoken silently during meditation. The thought pictures summoned by the phrases were instrumental in bringing peace and tranquility during the early stages of a meditation, and enabled access to the deep quietness of the mind to be gained with great success. It is hoped that the listener too may similarly benefit. The first meditation was given to me on the 9th of June 1980 by a gentleman called Father Ignatius, who, when he was alive on earth here, was a Benedictine monk, I believe, and he lived in a strangely named abbey in Devon called Blackthorn Abbey. I begin. If a wheel is considered, say a heavy cart wheel, the wheel rotates, the rim is heavy, and so the wheel turns slowly but powerfully. Imagine that the wheel is life going slowly on and on. You are sitting on the edge of that wheel. All sorts of things are trying to stop the wheel from turning, but nothing can. The weight of spirit keeps the wheel turning. Eventually, the wheel completes a revolution and we arrive back at the point that we started at. So, we have achieved nothing? This is not true. Work has been done by the movement of the wheel. Goods have been moved, or a pulley has been raised. So it is with life. The movement of the wheel is irresistible. We must go along with it. When the wheel returns to the point from which it started, the measure of achievement is the work done and the service rendered. The second meditation. I begin. Let us sit on a beach by the sea. It is a warm, sunny day. The sea is calm and the sand hot. As we sit, we pick up a handful of sand and look at it. We see that it is not yellow and smooth. It consists of tiny crystals of many colours. Some of them sparkle like diamonds. We look at the surface of the sand and we realize that at one time long ago this was perhaps a cliff, and it has been eroded by the action of waves. Look at the sea, a vast expanse of blue-green water slowly undulating in the gentle breeze. Can we imagine or calculate the quantity of water? Can we see the myriad fishes, plants, animals, and organisms that live beneath the surface? Yet we know that they exist. We do not doubt the sky so blue, and yet invisible to our eyes. We observe a few birds flying, but we cannot see the insects, butterflies, and tiny creatures, nor can we see the air currents constantly moving. We accept that they are there. Now the sun, without which nothing can live, the glorious light and warmth that sustains our existence. And yet, who can see a sunbeam? Who can hold one in his hand? But we do not doubt the power of the sun. Its magnetic pull holds our universe in balance. The waves of the sea are influenced by the magnetic waves of the moon, which, once again, are invisible to our senses, and yet we know that they are there. So it is with the spirit world. All of it is invisible to our normal senses, and yet we can believe that it exists. We are the lucky ones, because we are the chosen people. We who can accept more than our five senses tell us, and who believe in the infinite power and creation of God, are his chosen people. He sends his angels to guard us and keep us in all our ways. This wonder is sent to us for a simple act of faith, because we accept without question, without doubt, that there is more to our existence than the physical body that we see, and that behind everything is our Creator, our Father, Infinite Spirit. Third meditation. I begin. Sitting by the side of a stream on a sunny day, watch the water as it bubbles happily along down the mountain. The stream is sheltered by the leaves of trees, giving the water the appearance of myriad, multifaceted diamonds. If we consider one single drop of that water, we are aware of how totally unconcerned it is over its past or its future. It may have spent long years hidden deep in the mountains. It may have had to work its way across miles of stinking marshland. It may have been drunk and eliminated by some animal, but all that is behind it. At the moment, it is clean and fresh, full of life and happiness, bubbling along in the sun. It knows not of its future. Round the corner may be a waterfall waiting to dash it against rocks. There may be a huge lake waiting to absorb it into its stillness like a form of death. There may be an animal waiting to drink it again. It knows not, and it cares not. It was made by God and from God, and it is doing God's will at the moment. We are slightly different. We have the power to think, to reason, to intellectualize, and to fear. We have knowledge of our past, which causes us unhappiness if it was bad, and unhappiness if it was better than the present. We have awareness that there is a future. We are constantly apprehensive over what the future might bring. This condition may be likened to a drop of water that is trapped in a stinking marsh. It is surrounded by unpleasantness. It has slowly to make its way to the running water again, and this may take many, many years. Eventually, it will do so. God wants us to be like the water of a stream. His will is to allow us to be free, to be happy in the moment. We create the marsh with our thoughts and fears. We can, if we wish, turn away from the regrets of the past. They no longer exist, only in our minds. We do not know what lies ahead. Only God knows, and His will is that we should have faith in Him like a drop of water. He will deliver us safely through whatever tribulations await us. The key to getting from the marsh into the clear water of God is prayer and faith. We should pray for guidance, strength and courage, and in the same breath thank God for that help that is already available even before we ask. Of course, the future is important, and we should be forever open to a change in direction. But we should follow God's lead. We cannot force things to happen by our will. By being happy in the moment, we are doing God's will, and God will surely look after us. His whole hierarchy of spirit power is sent to strengthen and protect His own, and His own are those who trust in and do the will of God. The next meditation. Let us walk into a garden, a walled garden, the type that was built into the spacious gardens of large houses many years ago. It is beautifully and tastefully laid out with many roses and flowers of a variety of hues. All are in bloom. Colour is everywhere. The perfume is delightful. Outside the walled garden is an expanse of lawn. Despite the sun overhead, a cold wind blows. The few plants that there are stunted and unhappy looking. They have been cut back by the incessant wind, cold and driving rain. Inside the walled garden, one would imagine oneself to be in a different world. The same sun shines overhead, but the high walls keep out the wind and cold. When rain falls, it falls gently and nourishes the plants. The human condition can be compared to these gardens. Worldly conditions can be harsh and unkind. If we live in the outside world, our development is stunted by the conditions in which we live. We can discover another world, an inner world. Our minds can unlock the door to a world in which the harsh conditions outside cannot affect us. In this inner world, our spirits can flourish and blossom, nourished by the gentle power descending from the spirit world. The door into this inner world can be unlocked by meditation and quiet contemplation. Another meditation. I begin. Walk with me down an avenue of trees. Note the life that is all around us. The life in those green trees, in the insects and animals that live in those trees, and in the grass underfoot in the earth. As we take a step along the avenue, imagine each step to represent a day, a week, a season, a year. Between each step we observe so little change, and yet there is great change. All life has developed a little. Some insects and animals have died. Some are born, others mature. The same with the plants and trees. All are changed in some way, but at the time that we take that one step, we see no change. When we reach the end of the avenue, we look back and we can hardly recognize the avenue as the same one that we started out along. All the trees are different. Most have grown. Some are dead. Others have sprung into life. And so it is with our human lives. We go through life day by day and observe so little change. It is only when we pause and look back over a period of our lives, or indeed a complete lifetime, that we see much difference. We see how our hopes and ambitions that we started out with have grown to fruition or have withered and died. We see how new hopes have sprung into life. It causes us to wonder as to the nature of the mind that plans the avenue that causes the trees to grow or to die, and, if we look closely, we see the mind of God. With our lives we may also, if we seek, observe the mind of God, controlling and engineering everything. This will be the last meditation, and I begin. Let us walk into a garden and observe the plants growing there. In the middle of the garden is a large tree. This tree has been there for many years since it was planted. One wonders how many summers and winters it has seen, how many droughts and floods, how many birds have nested in its branches, the changes that have been made to the gardens. But the tree is oblivious to it all. It senses the changes in the seasons, and it senses drought or flood. However, no matter what occurs, and no matter what it senses, its attention never strays from its purpose, its reason for living. That purpose is to achieve perfection. Inside every atom of its totality is the power of God, forever driving it towards perfection. The tree knows this and concentrates all its attention on achieving this. However, the perfect tree is a matter of point of view. A bird's eye view of a perfect tree would be one that would provide shelter, food, and a nesting site. A squirrel's idea would be one containing a hollow and food. A human's ideal would be a tree of a certain size, colour, hardness of wood, etc. The tree can never be perfect from another's point of view. It can only be perfect from its own standpoint. Therefore, it tries only to be perfect within its own limitations. That is the end of the various meditations. We now come to a number of questions that were posed over a period of time, and the answers were given by various guides. The first one is talking about the miracle of turning water into wine by the Master Jesus. And this is the answer. It describes a marriage, an event where the Spirit of God, normally contained in the soul, is joined to the etheric and physical bodies. 3 days was the time it took for such an event to occur. Therefore, Jesus represents the Spirit of God, his mother represents the soul, and his disciples represent the etheric and physical bodies. When the time came for the Spirit of God to merge with the other bodies, the vibrational rate of blood was raised to incorporate the Spirit of God. "Woman, what have I to do with thee?" is a way of indicating that the soul and body are separate, not one. "Mine hour is not yet come" means the soul and spirit of God is not yet ready to make the final transition back to God. The governor of the feast is God. So when Jesus changed water into wine, he was imbuing the etheric bodies with his spirit. The next question was this: do animals eventually progress towards becoming human? And if not, what is the development path of animals? And this is the answer. All life has its place in God's world, and the paths of development are quite separate. The rocks, plants, animals and humans are developing along separate lines, and their development is decided and controlled by different types of archangels. All life has a similar goal, that is, perfection. In humans, the individual souls seek a spiritual perfection before merging into a group soul perfection. Animals, plants and rocks, although they have a spiritual counterpart, that is, a spirit plane where they go between incarnations, are designed to be on earth. They are creatures of earth. Each in his species seeks perfection of that species as a creature perfectly adapted to earth conditions. They will always remain on earth. They can never be humans. However, they are developing and ever-changing. If a species is unable to adapt to changing earth conditions, the physical bodies die out. Their souls go to a plane of animal consciousness and will slowly dissolve into the power which is used to create and strengthen other animals. Some monkeys resemble humans. However, that is coincidence. All animals have to have some particular features, and with the great variety of animals that there are, it is inevitable that one species should resemble humans. However, there is no connection. The next question: are the spirits and spirit guides that men can contact separate beings from that of men, or are they memories from previous incarnations? And this is the answer. All humans are separate entities in the sense that each are individual. Each individual soul, personality, person is a complete being unto himself. He is able to operate successfully as a human person in the meaning that is generally understood on the earth plane. Each spirit or spirit guide in the heaven spheres is also an individual entity and has his own thoughts, concepts, feelings, ideas. However, just as the atoms that go to make up, say, a car, are separate and complete in themselves, but nevertheless are bound to travel where that car travels, so all souls are in groups of souls who travel eternity together and are bound together in what may be called a group soul. It is the destiny of that group soul to share problems, assist and advise each other, and to advance as a group towards perfection. This is all a part of the law of like attracting like. Souls that were conceived at about the same time tend to be at the same state of advancement together, and so, by the law, are attracted to each other. Of course, any individual may advance or slow down as an individual and therefore drop from that group, ultimately to join another group of the same level as himself. Souls at a standstill are attracted to each other. Souls bent on doing evil work are attracted to each other. The group soul to which we, your friends in spirit, both known and unknown, you, your wife, family, and many of your friends with similar interests to yourself belong, have been travelling for many, many years. We have seen much, done much, and made many mistakes. Mistakes and triumphs of individuals are felt keenly by the group. In a very real sense, the group soul exists as a single entity, and in that sense we are all one. At all times we are all very close to each other and are in each other's thoughts. Our auras intermingle. If you had the eyes of spirit, you would see the individual auras of the members of the group and also the group aura that results from the intermingling of all the auras. It is not natural for God's creatures to live singly. All of creation operates according to the law of mutual attraction, and ultimately all the different individuals will merge completely with their group souls, and all the group souls will merge into one. That merging happens now and has happened for a long time to more advanced groups. That at oneness after merging causes oblivion to the individual, and the power released is, of course, the power of God from whence all started. Another question. What does forgive yourself first, then forgive others mean? And the answer comes up now. When we have offended against another, it is not the individual that we have attempted to harm, but God made manifest in that man. God would never take revenge against us. His love is total. Therefore, we realize that we have made the cardinal error of offending against someone whom it is impossible to hate, because God is total love. We also realize that we are part of God. In offending against another, we are attempting to hurt a brother and our Father. We also are made in God's image. We also have a spark of God in us. It follows that when we attempt to hurt another, we must be attempting to hurt the same God that is present in both parties. We are, therefore, attempting to hurt ourselves. Such a foolish act of harming ourselves can only be pardoned by ourselves. Once we realize this fact and are sorry that we were foolish enough to harm ourselves by attempting to harm another, we are in a position to observe the actions of those who would harm us and forgive them, for they know not what they are doing. Another question. What is God? How did God come about? What was before God? This is actually a four-part answer. The first part. God is the force that we see all around us, from which everything is made. We cannot see God. We can only see the effect and know that God is the originator. Second part. God is the natural result of the most fundamental law of the cosmos, the law of mutual attraction. Like attracts like. Before there was any order in the universe, this law was working, attracting molecules of matter together and conversely making space attract space. As atoms come together, this law continues to operate, ensuring that substances of beauty attract other substances of beauty. Discordant shapes attract discordant shapes. Molecules with a tendency towards animate life attract similar elements, and so it goes on. Over eons of time, all that we see has been formed by this law. This is the shaping hand of God. From this spiritual law, beings have similarly developed, and other aspects were developed which have resulted in all that we see and know. Now it is so complex that we are able to talk of God as a being. But God is the ever-developing result of natural law. God is good because, by the natural law, goodness is more powerful than evil, unity more powerful than chaos. If chaos ruled, there would only be a splitting up until nothing existed, which would be self-defeating. As so much exists, we must accept that goodness is more powerful, therefore God is goodness. The angels are aware of this and actively work to increase the power of goodness, which is God. The Christ called God his Father, quite rightly, because the law of mutual attraction, which resulted in substance of a spiritual nature coming together to form the power of goodness, was able to cause good matter to mass together, which is the intelligence that we know as Christ. This applies equally to us all. There are many other laws that enable the spirit and physical worlds to operate, but this explanation provides a basis for understanding. The third part. Before God, there was only chaos. Order had not come to the universe, because the law of attraction is such that the more spread out the molecules of substance, that the more slowly they come together. The statement in the Bible concerning the amount of time God took to form the world can only be taken figuratively. And then there's a rider. We should all believe in God. Live a life of godliness and do God's work, because by doing so we will bring more and more power of goodness together, which will result in ever greater power of God. Any evil thought or action has the result of negating the power of good, which is God. If evil, which is chaos, were practiced on a wide scale, destruction of all matter would result. Nothing positive can ultimately be achieved by thinking or doing any action that is negative. Can a house be built by separating and spreading out the bricks and timbers? Okay. Next question. Animals have illnesses similar to humans. In humans, this is considered to be karmic debt. How can animals incur a debt? And the answer is, animals do not incur a debt as do humans. The illnesses to which animals are subject are there so that the species of animal may develop to perfection. Illnesses sort out the weaker of any species, leaving the stronger animals to carry on. Thus, in nature, all physical life is adapting and evolving towards perfection. Question. Why is it necessary for us to go through physical life? Have the archangels ever been through similar experiences? Why cannot we choose to be perfect as we were made? And the answer is, when life is created, it is perfect, but without experience. Some souls do not need to sense temptation. They know within themselves that they are of God and it is only godlike sentiments that matter. There is no purpose in such souls incarnating on earth. Experience is gained in the heavenly spheres, experience of helping, of service, of humility, etc. They progress towards a state of near perfection, and we call them archangels. When they no longer require to be of service, they take the final step and merge into oneness with God. All souls may progress in a similar fashion at any time. It is not necessary to incarnate again and again. By rejecting temptation and keeping one's whole aim concentrated upon seeking God, a state can rapidly be reached where incarnation is no longer necessary. Then progress can be made through the spiritual spheres. Remember that knowledge does not have to be gained by first-hand experience. By believing in God and by actively seeking the path to perfection, knowledge and power is given by a spiritual process that results in a person knowing what to do and what not to do. By such a process do humble disciples rise to be archangels. Question. It is stated in the Bible that Jesus said to the rich man in answer to the question as to what he should do to enter the kingdom of heaven, "Sell all you have, give it to the poor, and follow me." In view of that, is it correct for spiritual leaders to live in palaces and to be surrounded by great opulence? And the answer: a person who is spiritually advanced would happily serve God by working and living in whatever circumstances he was required so to do. However, do you think that Jesus lives in squalor? He lives in a great palace surrounded by things of beauty. This is the inevitable result of the beauty that he exudes from his perfect personality. In a similar fashion, it is almost inevitable that a true disciple of God who had made sufficient progress along the path towards God would attract round him things of beauty. This would include not only buildings and furniture, but would indicate that the people with whom he mixed would exude beauty also. This does not imply that the God-filled person is in any way decadent or at fault. It implies that God has rewarded his faithful servant by surrounding him with things of beauty, which are his just rewards for service rendered unto God. Question. For most people, there never seems to be sufficient time in a day to do the things that we have to do and the things that we want to do. And yet, some people achieve so much in their lifetime. How is this? And the answer: there is always time to do that which we have to do. God always grants us sufficient time, if necessary, through one or more incarnation. Therefore, we should not ever need to hurry. However, life proceeds at its inevitable pace, and we often appear like mice in a wheel, racing to keep pace with it. That is because we do not have our lives under control. It is essential to reach into the hidden depths in order to release power that will regulate the pace of our lives until it is in step with the pace of the flow of total life. Then, the two being in phase with each other, difference will disappear and time will appear to be motionless. If time remains at rest, one has an infinite time in which to achieve that which needs to be accomplished. The means of keeping our lives under control is to locate and tap the hidden spring of spiritual power in the soul. This can be done by meditation and contemplation. Eventually, a stage is reached where one moves in harmony with the flow of life. This can be achieved on earth during an earthly incarnation. The result would be a release of sufficient energy to carry out the task in hand, a sense of well-being and of purpose and satisfaction that every task taken will be completed. Yet another question. On the subject of diet, it is stated that humans travel along one of 12 rays, the signs of the Zodiac, but that plants, etc., are grouped together according to their species, and each species travels along any particular ray. Why is this? The answer. The technique whereby humans incarnate is more complex than the effect that causes vegetables to grow. Humans originate from the same source as does all life, but once the decision is made to direct it in any particular direction, then the routes that are taken, which finish with togetherness on earth, are different. In the case of a human, the matter is further complicated by the fact that humans are capable of emotions and thoughts, feelings and sensibilities totally outside of the spectrum that any vegetable would consider. Therefore, it has proved necessary and indeed vital in the final analysis to divide human life into one of the 12 carrier waves, and each person created from life force will travel that wave. Vegetables, being much more simple, do not need to be split individually and therefore may be grouped, and those groups will travel a particular ray. Further, it will be noted that humans incarnate from one of 12 staging posts according to the time of year that corresponds to the planet Earth becoming in line with any particular one of the 12 holding planets. Vegetables of any particular group come direct from the Earth in that they do not originate in the manner that humans do. For instance, if we take the example of a carrot, the new generation of carrots form from the seed heads of the parent carrot. Therefore, the potential or embryo carrot is already there. It merely requires for the life force to blend direct from the spiritual realms into the seed of the embryo carrot, whereas a human incarnates from a staging post placed between the spiritual realm of creation and the earth. Thus, it is possible for all carrots to vibrate to a particular ray, the ray incidentally bearing little relation to time in the accepted sense that humans incarnate. Matter can be conveyed along a carrier wave at will, regardless of any time of the year. And this answer also goes on to give some advice, which I'll read. Herbs should not be eaten simply to flavour food. They are beneficial to mankind as medicines, and if frequently consumed as part of daily diet, their effectiveness will diminish as the body becomes used to their properties. If it is considered that diet may be bland and that dishes prepared using only the vegetables recommended for an individual of any particular birth sign might be uninteresting, it should be noted that a. The cook should be prepared to experiment with combinations of vegetables, fruits, nuts and pulses to create dishes of interest. B. Diet should be considered to be an act of devotion to God, and the limitations compared to a previous diet accepted. C. If the end justifies the means, then the results of following a diet will be radiant health and the sure knowledge that one is following the path that one should. That is the end of the questions and answers.